presentation that will complement all three of our guest speakers today. But first, I just want to extend immense gratitude for taking the time out of your busy schedule today, as we're extremely excited to present to you our presentation on shadow revenue, and more specifically, our process and identification of the gaps in uncollected business tax revenue. We will begin our presentation by providing further context around the need for additional funding across local communities, and additionally, how certain revenue streams go uncollected. This will be followed by a results-driven case study that includes the three-phase process Avenu used to identify thousands of unlicensed businesses, resulting in millions of dollars in new revenue. Our conversational style presentation will last roughly 30 to 35 minutes, followed by a brief 10 to 15-minute question and answer period directly following the presentation. Those questions can be submitted through the chat feature here in WebEx, or you can send those inquiries directly to our team standing by at webinars@avenuinsights.com, and we'll make sure to get those questions answered. So first, my name is Brendan Middleton, Marketing Manager here at Avenu Insights and Analytics, and I'll be your host and moderator. I'll facilitate those questions. I'll make sure our panel gets those questions verbally at the end, and we'll answer those questions live, so submit those throughout or directly following. Next, I'd like to introduce to you all three of our presenters. First, one that we're extremely excited about and very thankful, one of our longtime partners and valued customers, Revenue Manager for the City of Richmond, California, Antonio Benuelos. Antonio will help us tell the story of the partnership with Richmond and highlight the key impacts that Avenu and Richmond were able to make together with regard to this undiscovered revenue. Next, Avenu's Senior Vice President, Patrick Scott. Patrick brings over 20 years of direct management experience in IT operations and municipal consulting. Patrick is operations of Avenu's East region and has successfully led partnerships to maximize state and local government revenues, increasing compliance, and expanding their tax base. Next, Avenu Vice President of Local Tax Compliance, Lisa Varelli. Lisa brings over 30 years of experience serving municipal clients. She currently leads our Local Tax Compliance Division, where she manages teams throughout the U.S. providing revenue discovery and recovery services to over 300 clients nationwide. So very briefly, our agenda for the day, as we previously mentioned, we'll first identify the need for funding in local communities, and then more specifically how certain revenue streams go unidentified and therefore uncollected. And then next we'll look at the City of Richmond, California specifically, and hear how these programs that were put into place resulted in the identification of over 2,700 unlicensed businesses totaling $2.2 million in new revenue. Lastly, we will outline the three-phase process used to identify uncollected business tax and the ongoing benefits that these programs provide. Again, before we get started, the question and answer period can be accessed here in the chat feature, or send inquiries to webinars at avenuinsights.com. So very briefly, who is Avenu? Avenu provides revenue enhancement and administrative solutions to over 900 cities and counties nationwide. We focus specifically on helping you find, recover, and manage your revenue base through the enhancement and collection of taxes and fees. Avenu's data-driven analytic tools help provide the insight and clarity needed to reduce budgetary risk, but also provides an interactive way of visualizing your current and trending tax revenue. So very briefly, following our question and answer period, we'll have a special offer as alluded to in most of our promotional materials. We'll have a free assessment available, and the details of that will follow our question and answer period, so stay tuned for that. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Patrick Scott.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As many of you are aware, the need for funding, the expectation of services, and the constraint on resources have never been greater. While state and federal funding has been shrinking to local jurisdictions, we've seen a number of jurisdictions over 61 municipalities since 2010 that have gone into bankruptcy. Cities have also seen slow growth in their general revenue funds to only 0.9% in 2017, while their expenditures have increased 2% over that same period. We hope today with this webinar that we can help you shed some light on how Avenu helps local governments increase their revenue, level the playing field by making sure everybody's paying their fair share, help increase taxpayer education and business community awareness of the compliance and their tax requirements, provide support to local jurisdictions who are already strapped with constrained resources, and illuminate for you how we develop these programs and provide solutions in a self-funding and budget-neutral way. How revenue goes collected or uncollected. Whether we're talking about the transient natures of businesses today through increased mobile and virtual platforms that our businesses today operate on, or the global nature in which they have expanded their services both regionally and globally, whether we're talking about unlicensed contractors, for example, landscapers or plumbers who are operating off the radar, home-based businesses such as software developers, social media marketers, bloggers, personal trainers, the increase in rental income activity that has been supercharged by companies like Airbnb, HomeAway, or Flipkey, and the lack of just jurisdictional resources brought about on revenue constraints to be able to go after and stay on top of these changing activities in their business communities. These things all contribute to the revenue gaps and the compliance issues that we've seen around the country with many of our clients and the communities that we serve. How much revenue is a municipality missing? This can vary depending on your geographical location, your business density, your resource capability, your technology platforms, the normal changes in your business cycle, and your ability to be able to apply the limited resources you have along with the limited technology to be able to go after and identify the changes in this business community over a period of time. We've seen in some cases, and you'll hear about one of them in a case study later on in our webinar, that the missed revenue in a particular tax category can be upwards of 50%. And you'll hear later on how we will be able to help you develop some insight into how much you're missing.
Thanks, Patrick. So next, let's shift gears. I'd like to welcome, again, Antonio Banuelos. Antonio, first, thanks again for joining us today. And secondly, can you begin by just telling us a little bit of background on Richmond and then further dive into the partnership and the impact that our partnership was able to make?
Sure. Thanks, Brennan. And good morning, good afternoon. Again, my name is Antonio Banuelos. I'm the revenue manager, and I work in the finance department for the city of Richmond. In the revenue team, we have 5 people focused basically on cashiering, invoicing, payment processing, but only one that is really dedicated to business license outreach and collection. City of Richmond is in the East Bay part of the San Francisco Bay Area, just north of Oakland and Berkeley, about 15 miles east of the city of San Francisco. With no traffic, it's a quick 20-minute drive, but usually more like an hour drive. Anyway, we have our own port and our own marina. We will shortly have a new ferry service and terminal take commuters and tourists across the bay to San Francisco via a 30-minute boat ride. There's currently a lot of activity in the city of Richmond. The local refinery recently completed a $1 billion modernization project. There's construction boom throughout the city for all types of structures, including industrial complexes, warehousing, apartments, and single-family dwellings. So we have a very diversified economy that is emerging from what was once a city very heavily dependent on one company. The city of Richmond, I'm sorry. Brennan, can you go to this next slide, please? Sorry about that. City of Richmond has a population of about 105,000, and that has been fairly steady these past few decades. Although we do expect some growth with new residential developments that are currently underway. We currently have 750 employees, but through retirements mostly these past 10 years, we streamlined that workforce down to 750. No layoffs though. Nearly half the employees here in the city of Richmond work in public safety. Our general fund budget of $168 million is made up primarily in property taxes, which is 22% of the general fund. In California, because of Prop 13, we rarely see huge upticks in property tax, usually steady growth though, with some spikes when new developments come along. Sales and use tax for us is about 25% of general fund. Sales tax has been growing at a really good pace in Richmond throughout the various segments. Utility user tax for us is 29%, our largest revenue segment. UT, unlike sales tax though, has been slowly going down, primarily because people are going away from cable. They're getting cheaper cell service, and many households are opting for solar power. These main revenue streams are what they are, meaning there's often very little we can do to increase the revenue without going to the voters. We are left at the whim of the market or the economy. The best we can hope for is to understand the trends, make accurate projections, and plan accordingly. The last 24% comes from various other taxes and fees, including business license tax. In Richmond, business license tax is the main revenue that we are solely responsible for. We're not dependent on the state or the county to collect for us. Our efforts lead us to more or less tax collection. Balancing the budget every year seems to get harder and harder. As mentioned by Patrick, expenses are rising faster than revenues. So when we were facing significant budget gap a couple years back, we knew we had to quickly find new revenue without going to the voters. We had no money to spend on this. So when Avenu came along with a proposal to find and collect business license tax on a contingency fee basis, it was a no-brainer for us. It also happened to coincide with some other issues and projects that were just starting in Richmond. Voters had recently approved a new rent control ordinance, residential inspection program with the aim to safeguard and preserve the housing stock was underway, and this was coupled with increasing demand of the local residential housing. So we have this interesting paradox in Richmond. Long-time residents associate Richmond with crime pollution. Newer and younger residents associate Richmond with nice coastline with a great waterfront view with bay trails and biking trails, and relatively low cost of living, but also with very convenient location to the job centers of San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley. Also, by Bay Area standards, the rents are cheap here. For a one-bedroom apartment, for example, the average rent in San Francisco is $3,500. In Richmond, it's $1,500. So also had modest housing for sale. The median home value in San Francisco is $1.4 million. In Richmond, that's $500,000. But as in this changing environment, we still see the historical legacy that keeps housing costs modest, but those same low costs are attracting people fleeing from skyrocketing rents in other parts of the Bay Area and pushing out long-time residents. Because of the increased demand, property owners are able to increase rents without investing in their properties. So we see people converting garages and in-law units to regular rents and even to short-term rentals. This without going through the proper permitting process or paying their corresponding taxes. But let me back up a little bit. In Richmond, back in 2003, we started considering any rental property, both commercial and residential, a business. We have been reaching out to landlords and trying to collect that tax, but the compliance rate has been very low, only about 25%. We have tried different methods. We've tried mass mailing. We tried amnesty programs. But frankly, we didn't have the manpower to properly follow up with every single letter we sent and quickly answer every single telephone call that we received. We often got the same response from the property owners. We've owned this property for a long time and never knew we had a license. At least that's what they claimed. Now with the rent control and the rent inspection programs coming up, we knew property owners would not be happy with another tax and another fee. But we knew we had to be more aggressive to make sure everyone was paying their fair share. So that's when we reached out to Avenu. And once the contract was in place and the ball got rolling with Avenu, they quickly developed both the database and the form letters. The database was a listing of possible or probable businesses, including rental properties that showed up in their various databases as being possible businesses. but which didn't show up in our business license database. In the progressive form letters, Avenu included language a little more, let's say, aggressive than what we usually send. We reviewed, made suggestions, and approved all the templates for the correspondence with the potential business owners. The goal was to be clear, straightforward, and serious. The city, through Avenu, meant business. Either pay the tax or prove to us you don't own a business. The onus was on the business owner to demonstrate that. Additionally, to give non-compliant businesses an incentive, the City Council approved an amnesty program. Here, we waived all late fees and penalties to any business that paid the tax within a certain time frame. A lot of customers are very appreciative of this. In our case, these penalties could have been an additional 50% of the total tax. So with the efforts of Avenu, they identified and collected from nearly 2,800 businesses. Most of these for us were rental properties. For rental properties, we went from 24% compliance to nearly 70% compliance. We still have a ways to go, but we're happy with the progress made these past couple of years. Avenu brought in $2.2 million the first year. This included many businesses paying up to 3 years in back taxes plus the current year. It also helped shore up our rainy day fund. We ended up that year with a nice little surplus in the general fund. Also, the yearly base increased by about $360,000 per year, conservatively. This new recurring revenue, which we wouldn't have had without this program. For us, this is the equivalent of a couple of rookie police officers. And also definitely helps close the yearly general fund budget gap that we have to manage every year. So identifying the rental properties also helps shore up our rental property database for the other programs we have rolled out. It also helps in ensuring more people are paying their fair share and are in compliance with the various regulations in the City of Richmond. And finally, it helps in reaching out and educating taxpayers on their obligations when operating in the City of Richmond.
Awesome. Thank you, Antonio. This is very valuable overview and feedback and outline the impact that was made. Next, I'd like to welcome our Avenu Vice President, Lisa Varelli, who leads our local tax division. Lisa, can you dive into the three-phase process that was used for Richmond and many other jurisdictions that you and your team manage?
Sure, Brendan. Thank you. We implement our discovery and recovery projects in phases. Our experience shows us that this is the phased approach ensures the highest quality and results to our clients. Once we sign a contract for services, I will assign a project manager and a project team that I determine is best suited to execute the services for a given jurisdiction. We have project managers and teams located throughout the country with experience in local tax compliance. When I assign a project manager and team, I factor in things such as location, size, the local tax structure, ordinances, and regulations. I select the Avenu project team best suited to deliver with the most experience in a given region. The Discovery Recovery project is executed in 3 phases. We begin with a preparation or setup phase that lasts about 30 days. Then we move into implementation in the testing phase for about 45 to 60 days. Finally, we enter into the active phase that is ongoing and iterative. During phase 1, our project manager will be responsible for designing a plan that is focused around what is best suited for your local jurisdiction. We begin by analyzing your local ordinances, tax structure, local business environment, and demographics. Based on that research and experience, we develop a plan of action that we believe will identify the areas of noncompliance specific to your jurisdiction. We will present this to you as our recommended approach and focus of our discovery efforts. Early in phase 1, shortly after the contract is signed, we have a kickoff meeting with you and your designated staff. Ideally, this meeting will include the person or persons that are designated as the project lead on your side. This meeting is our first opportunity to collaborate with you and lay out the scope of our project. We'll listen to your needs and goals for the engagement. We will walk through the process and explain our phased approach in detail. The topics usually are, first, an introduction to our team members and their role and responsibilities, and what you can expect from us. Second, We make a recommendation from the results of our research and analysis that I described earlier. We'll discuss your current level of compliance, what discovery efforts, if any, do you have in place now or in the past. What do you believe to be your areas of greatest noncompliance? Do you have any specific areas of focus for us? Any suggestions or any concerns? At this time, we'll decide where to focus our discovery efforts. Third, we discuss the documents and the scripts that we'll use for your projects, and we will create and present those to you for your approval. Our process for accepting payments, applications, billings, and any system requirements that you may have, reporting frequencies, what we need from you, which is normally data and approvals. We'll wrap up the meeting by agreeing on the above items, and we also define what our next steps will be. Within a few days of that meeting, we'll send you a written project plan that includes our agreed-upon plan of action and a timeline. We also send you the forms that we'll use for your project, for the outreach. We proceed immediately by acquiring the necessary data. This is where we use our data analysis techniques and business intelligence tools, along with our extensive tax expertise, to compile a verified list of non-compliant businesses subject to taxation in your jurisdiction. This wraps up phase one. We strongly feel that the work that we put in and invest during this phase is critical to the success of the project. Phase two. This is where we implement and test the plan. We'll select a sample set of about 100 prospects for our initial outreach. You will have the opportunity to review the first set before mailing. Shortly thereafter, we follow up with another set. After this initial outreach, this is when we begin to receive inbound calls, correspondence from taxpayers, and we start getting applications and payments. We'll also ask you to test any calculations for interest and penalty for us to bill, because we want to make sure that 100% of our calculations are in sync with your methodology. During this phase, we take the opportunity to review everything and make any adjustments that may be necessary before we enter full production. Phase three is of our discovery recovery is basically our active phase. This is when the Avenu team, including the project manager and the compliance specialists and tax analysts on our side, are performing the outreach and recovery portion of the project. The outreach and recovery performed by our Avenu staff includes mailing of a series of 3 notices, outbound phone calls and emails. We'll respond to taxpayers and their representatives by phone and in writing. We educate and assist your taxpayers based on our knowledge of your ordinances and processes. We begin collecting payments, completed forms from taxpayers, and then we submit those funds and reporting over to the jurisdiction. We respond to your internal staff for any special requests, reporting, etc. And we have regularly scheduled project status meetings with your staff that will include our project team and our client services manager. This is a good representation of how our discovery recovery cycle works. We begin with our unique ability to combine our data analytics, business intelligence, and human expertise. From here, we build your jurisdiction's business inventory and identify the non-compliant businesses based on our agreed-upon scope. Our in-house tax analysts and compliance specialists perform the outreach and education to your taxpayers and constituents specific to your local ordinances and regulations. They also receive and reconcile filings and payments to guarantee that each taxpayer is fully compliant for all back periods up to and including the current period. Once we have verified compliance, we turn everything over to the jurisdiction where you will enjoy the expanded tax revenue base on a go-forward basis. So, based on our experience, where do we find it? To give you some idea of the discovery projects where we find most of the non-compliance and where we actually are able to generate the most revenue come from general business. Those are the brick and mortars. Here we also serve to drill down to businesses operating within a business, who's operating in the Walmart, who does their security, their janitorial services, et cetera. Second would be the commercial, industrial, farming, residential rental income. This is a very high area of noncompliance throughout the country. Contractors and subcontractors. These are always a problem with compliance. Itinerant, transient businesses, home-based businesses, short-term rentals, another trending area of noncompliance. We also find a lot of noncompliance to be industry-specific. For example, we'll take a look at hospital complexes or other industrial complexes to find providers that might be operating independently within these bigger businesses. It's our experience that most jurisdictions simply don't have the resources to commit to these compliance efforts, and we're able to bring our expertise and committed resources to raising these revenues. Our collaborative approach is the foundation for successful partnerships. The presentation and result that Antonio shared earlier is a very good example of the value we bring through the delivery of our discovery and recovery services to our clients. Our partnerships tend to focus with our clients on identifying the problem, developing the planned solution, and implementing the solution and providing the results.
Thank you, Lisa. Our tax experience, our national scale, allows us to bring the industry best practices to every engagement that we conduct around the country. Our historical experience in developing the phase approach that Lisa just talked about, along with our legislative team that keeps track of both state and federal legislation that may impact local governments, allows us to deliver a high-quality project to each and every engagement around the country. We are able to adapt and provide programs for jurisdictions large and small throughout the country, varying tax types, varying resource sizes. An example of some of those engagements in a model, for example, Warren County, who's a new client to us, who just signed up with us this year. In less than 90 days, we were able to generate $140,000 of additional revenue for Warren County, which represented about 4% of this particular budget category for Warren County and their net profit stacks. We identified over 500 new or potential non-compliant businesses and have already collected from almost 300 of those businesses. In Vestavia Hills, for example, who's a long-term client of ours, we've recovered close to $1.6 million for Vestavia Hills, identified almost 3,000 businesses that were operating off the radar, and we're able to work with them to create a level playing field, making sure that everybody was paying their fair share, and provide and work with Vestavia to provide an equitable distribution of their tax enforcement and compliance process. And again, this lends itself and gives us the ability to scale large and small, to handle smaller jurisdictions and towns, and even work with cities which we currently have, such as the city of LA or Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. It's this phase approach and our ability to scale and our historical expertise that allows us to handle projects of varying sizes throughout the country. One of the things that we're most proud of is not just our ability to go in and stand up a project for a given jurisdiction, but the ongoing benefits of that project. So when we go in and our discovery projects identify businesses who have been operating below the radar or transient businesses that are flowing in and out of a given jurisdiction, the benefit of that work is seen year over year in the expansion of the tax base, as alluded to in the case study for Richmond, where they're seeing at least, at minimum, a $360,000 increase in revenue year over year. And as we stated, that contributes to new police officers, teachers, funding revenue officers, and other projects within the community. It also provides a sense of fairness, that your business community understands that the city is partnering and going all out to make sure that everybody is contributing to the success of the community as a whole. And it's one of the things that we're most proud of.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Antonio. Next, I'd like to kind of shift into the final portion of our presentation today and answer the questions that many of you have provided already through the chat feature and also through our webinar's email distribution. But first, before we answer the first question, I just want to remind everyone of the free assessment that we're offering today to all those that are in attendance. I'm going to give you the details on that in just a second with regard to data collection and, providing a customized free assessment of the potential uncollected business tax revenue in your jurisdiction. There's some nuances and specifics that we need with regard to your specific situation, so we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first and foremost, and this is pretty straightforward, the first question that came through, it just simply says, how much is your service? How much does this cost?
So the cost of our service depends on the jurisdiction, the tax types, and the engagement on our discovery project. But all of our discovery projects are self-funding or budget neutral, so there's no out-of-pocket cost to a jurisdiction to stand up our project and work with us in a collaborative way for us to help extend your enforcement capability. So we only get paid on what we actually identify and collect for our jurisdictions.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, second one, Antonio, I believe this one was directed to you as from a personal experience. How much of your staff's time was needed through this implementation, and can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure, Brendan. Well, I was a point person with Avenu. Anybody had any inquiries, they would direct them directly to me. I took all the phone calls. I worked with Avenu in trying to set up database where I could upload it into our system. We tried to avoid any manual entry into our software. Also provided to Avenu our database, so worked with our IT to streamline that. The only part other people in my staff got involved was when the business license specialist printed and mailed the business license certificate, and once in a while you had walk-up customers who want to go directly through the city of Richmond, so we treated those as new businesses.
Fantastic. Okay. Thirdly, we had a question come through, Patrick, Lisa. What experience do you have working with small towns, specifically with populations below 10,000, 7,000, 5,000, and what's your experience and what kinds of new revenues have you documented on that scale?
So we work with jurisdictions large and small. We have many of our clients that are actually below 10,000 in population. And again, the beauty of our program is we develop a specific solution for that particular jurisdiction, for those particular tax types that you levy, for your ordinance, your exemptions, and your resource capabilities. So it doesn't matter to us whether you're a jurisdiction of 5,000 or 50,000. We are developing a solution that's uniquely specific to deliver the results for your particular jurisdiction. And again, the range of fines really runs the gamut. I mean, we have some jurisdictions that have a 10,000 population, and we could have, $100 or $200 or $300,000 fine because they have, a single industrial or commercial entity operating within that jurisdiction that's been in a non-compliant situation. So it can run the gamut as far as what we find in the size of the jurisdiction.
Okay. This was more of a general statement. It seems like a question as well, though. It says, we're understaffed today. I think we referenced the question a minute ago, how much of my staff's time is needed. Patrick, Lisa, can we talk to the understaffing piece for some of these jurisdictions that don't quite have the staff that's able to commit to a full-on, process like this, and what do we do when that's the case?
Sure. We have experience with a large number of our clients that have very, very small staff, maybe a half of an FTE dedicated to this work, and we're able to partner with them and complement their staff. I mean, realistically, we do most of the work ourselves. Our initial project setup involves limited work with the jurisdiction staff, and then we are able to, we perform all the outreach, we collect all of the payments and all of the documentation, and we perform most of the work on the Avenu side. So we are able to work with jurisdictions that have very, very small or limited staff.
And just to tag on to that, most of the jurisdictions, or a lot of the jurisdictions that are contracting with us, are contracting with us because they want to extend their capability to be able to generate additional revenue and increase compliance, and know that they have a smaller staff and not the ability to do that.
True. Good point.
Great.
Another question that came through was, is this in perpetuity, or is the database ever turned over to the local government?
The database is always your database, so it's never Muni's database. So we're just working to identify anomalies or folks that are operating outside of your current database. So our job is to actually add or improve your database, but it's always the jurisdiction's database.
We continue to provide the discovery through the life of the contract, so we'll run these projects 1 or 2 times per year while we're under contract to continue to discover new businesses that come into your jurisdiction.
Got it.
And then to you.
And additionally, can we customize the level of participation in our collections, or would Avenu take over collections completely?
We customize. Ideally and typically, we take all of the collection work on, and we collect all the payments and all the documentation, tax returns, applications, et cetera. We are flexible when we set up our projects, and when we work with our clients, we are definitely flexible, and we want to complement the work that's done at the jurisdictions level. So we're definitely open to working with the jurisdiction to set up a process that works for them.
And guys, this one has come through several times already. It says, do the collections of the revenue go straight to Avenu or to the city first, and then, or to Avenu and then remitted back to the city, or to the city and then remitted back to Avenu? Can you speak to that process a little bit?
Sure. So typically they come to us, come to Avenu. We take the collections of all the actual payments and the documentation, and then we perform our compliance work and we turn everything over to the jurisdiction. But we do have some jurisdictions that want to receive the money themselves. So we are definitely flexible, and we will let those collections go directly to the jurisdiction. We're fine with that. We just set up a process that works for both parties.
And Patrick, as a second, tier to that question, I think someone was asking, can you provide a little bit of scope of how much, revenue or how much Avenu administers kind of on a national scale? You mentioned you're a national company. Can you just provide kind of a high level of, the scope in which we provide, services to our clients nationwide?
So nationwide, I mean, we administer tax dollars in over $1 billion we process a year. On the discovery side, again, we discover and identify over 350 jurisdictions and upwards of $100 million of identified revenue on an annual basis for our customers.
Fantastic. And then to switch gears really quickly, a question came through the email. Do you offer this service for delinquent property taxes?
Yeah, so the way our services work, many of our jurisdictions, when we go in to do a discovery project, will also hand us identified delinquencies, and we will fold those into our process as well and present that as a unified project plan to our customers, so we can handle both the discovery and the collection of identified delinquencies, and whether it's business taxes or property taxes, we fold that all into the same process.
Awesome. Okay. Next one says, if our city or county does not currently require a business license or business tax, is that something that Avenu could help set up, or does Avenu, typically, just collect the uncollected revenues with regard to the existing tax structure?
So we can go in, and we do for a number of jurisdictions, we can go in and perform an analysis of your local ordinance if you want to enact a business tax ordinance or change or update or revise your business tax ordinance. We'll go in and take a look at your current ordinance, and we'll give you a comparative analysis to your neighboring jurisdictions or other jurisdictions in your geographic location, and provide that analysis to you. That is part of our business tax services, and that is actually a fee-for-service business, so that doesn't fall under the contingency fee business. That is actually a fee-for-service business, but we do have that capability, yes.
Very good. And then if you find all the non-compliers, so to speak, do you wait a year before reviewing them again, or do you hand that over to the jurisdiction, or do it 2 years? What's that process look like, Lisa?
So normally when we engage, typically we run one discovery project per year or two. So we always go in and do it again in the following year, and sometimes they'll do it twice a year. It really is dependent on the jurisdictions, what we found. Sometimes we'll want to explore other project areas. So always one time for sure, and sometimes twice per year.
And I was saving this one for the end because it kind of leads me into our next phase here. It says, what data is needed to identify how much my city is losing to noncompliance? And Patrick, you alluded to this earlier in our transition slide between you and Antonio. And then second part was, a couple times was asked, can you run an analysis? Well, that's exactly what we were alluding to earlier with our free assessment, so to speak. We are offering a free assessment today to all of you that have joined us. We'd love to provide a customized analysis of the potential uncollected revenue or business tax revenue for your jurisdiction. There is some unique data points that we need from you, and maybe some customized, nuance that are unique to your specific situation, maybe a focus area here or there. So we would need a few data points from you in order to provide that analysis. But Patrick, Lisa, can you guys just talk to what type of data is needed to identify these for a particular jurisdiction, and then can we run an analysis and what these next steps look like for those that do want that, and then we'll talk about how to initiate that analysis and get something in the works.
Yeah, so for all the jurisdictions that sign up for our free assessment, our team will sit down with you. We'll identify some data points, and I'll give you examples of them. Really, it's just for example, the different tax types that you levy, the number of businesses that you administer in each of those tax types, your tax rates, the average dollar value of the collection in each of those tax types, any exemption, a cursory review of your ordinance, and your level of resources on compliance. And we'll fold that in to our meeting with you to develop an assessment and be able to give you an idea of what your potential noncompliance is in your jurisdiction for each of those tax types. Any other questions come through, Brennan?
Oh, I apologize, guys. I had myself on mute, so forgive me for that. I was bringing us to the end there. Lisa, if you didn't have anything further to add with respect to the free assessment, we will, as a team, will be working directly with those of which are on the webinar today with Lisa and Patrick on communicating to you guys with regard to the free assessment. So you're talking to the folks that will be working directly with you. With that, I just want to wrap us up today. We're coming up against 45 minutes. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Thanks for taking the time today. If you have those free assessment inquiries and you would like for us to perform that for you, please send that inquiry to webinars@avenuinsight.com. That's webinars, plural, @avenu, A-V-E-N-U, insight, INSIGHTS.com, and we'll be happy to facilitate that for you and get that in the works. Again, thanks for joining us. I appreciate your time today. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Antonio. And we hope to hear from you soon.